Welcome to On Leadership, a midweek podcast from HDBB. We believe leadership is a posture, not a position, and in the same way postures can be improved, leaders can grow. We want to encourage you to keep going and to equip you with practical ways to grow as a leader. Thanks for tuning in to On Leadership.
Succession planning. Isn't that something that just CEOs do when they're about to retire? What's this got to do with me? Hi everyone, I'm Miles, the Vicar of HTBB and the Executive Director of Alpha Asia Pacific. Thank you for listening. In this podcast, I want to suggest that identifying and raising up successors is an essential part of your job as a leader. The measure of success of a leader is not just in what you get done or how many people follow you, but also how many other leaders you raise up. And nowhere is this more important than in the area of succession planning. So make sure you have a successor and are dispensable in your role. It sounds countercultural, but it's a sign of strong leadership that you've nurtured a successor and gives you the chance to move on. Succession planning is about preparing the organization for the future, but also about preparing you for your future. It opens up the possibility of you moving onwards and upwards into something new and exciting. Now, it used to be seen as HR's job to do succession, but it actually works much better when we do it, those actually in the job. Obviously, we need to involve HR in the process, and for senior appointments, it's important to involve your board or key stakeholders. But we need to see succession planning as a key part of our role and to own it. In the New Testament, St. Paul identified Timothy and had him accompany him in ministry for 15 years in preparation to be a successor. And then Paul, in his second letter to Timothy, told him to raise up others who would do the same. The principle is this: at every level in an organization, everyone should have a Timothy to help build the depth as well as the breadth of the bench strength. Now, if you're a parent, then your role is essentially raising up the next generation to succeed you. And even if you run a startup, succession planning is still important to consider, because sometimes a different type of leader might be required when the organization moves from startup to scale up. So this topic of succession is something that all of us should be considering. If that's a little on the why of succession, who or what should we be looking for in potential successors? Firstly, competency. Is the person actually any good at what they do? A lot is said about looking for someone's potential. But potential is open-ended. It focuses on the possible, but that which might never come to pass. Obviously, the person won't necessarily have all your skills set yet, but ask yourself, what have they actually done? Their achievements might not be on the scale nor of the same strategic significance as yours, but what have they achieved? Do they consistently outperform expectations and seem to function beyond and above the parameters of their current role? I am far more interested in what someone has done to date than in what they might do in the future if they fulfill potential. That's competency. Secondly, look for character. It's been said that your competency can get you to the top, but only your character can keep you there. Is the person honest, trustworthy, a person of integrity? One of the reasons for starting early and looking for successors is that it can take time for someone's true character to become clear as they work with others consistently in a team. Be slow to appoint, and if in doubt, don't appoint. Thirdly, culture. Do they fit the culture of the organization? This is hugely important. Culture is a combination of the personality and behavior of the organization, and is perhaps best summarized as, this is how we do things around here. 30% of new hires in the US fail within the first 18 months due to, you guessed it, poor culture fit. When I was researching corporate examples of succession, it became clear that there are far more examples of it going badly than going well. But a couple of things that successful examples had in common were, number one, The candidates to become successor were usually internal, not external candidates. Now, of course, there may be times when it's right to look externally to bring in missing competencies or a fresh perspective to the organisation. But more often than not, the best way to ensure a good culture fit is to look at who is thriving currently within the organisation's culture. The second thing that these examples of success had in common is that the process of identifying a successor was started early and not rushed. The luxury retailer Barney's of New York identified and developed 3 internal candidates over a 5-year period before they eventually chose a successor to lead the organisation forward, and it worked well. Having more than one person you're raising up can also be helpful to ensure eventual success. And take your time. The fourth thing is calling, the matter of calling. The world might describe this as, does the potential successor actually want the job? But as a Christian, I would ask, does God want them to have the job? Is He calling them to it? So pray about it. Ask for wisdom and guidance in your selection. Even Jesus spent a night in prayer alone before He chose His 12 disciples in Luke chapter 6. So if that's a little on what to look for in a successor, how do we actually go about making it all happen? This is the million-dollar question. A study by Deloitte showed that 86% of leaders believe that succession planning is both important and urgent, but only 14% believe they do it well. Organizations can often fall into the trap of making it all very subjective and people-centric. This can seem like an old boys network. It's who you know. Or they can make it objective and very process-driven. But this can seem cold, ignoring the highly relational aspect of culture fit. The best process is both objective and people-centric. It's a process that's both rational and relational. I believe the Bible is the best book on leadership ever written. And I want to draw out some lessons on how to do succession well from the story of 2 Kings chapter 2, when Elisha succeeds Elijah as prophet in Israel. From this story, we can pull out some powerful lessons of what the current leader should do, what the wider organization should do, and what the chosen successor should do to make this work well. So firstly, the current leader, what should they do? 4 things if you're looking for a successor. Number 1, start the process of selecting a successor early. Right back in 1 Kings chapter 19, after a time of prayer and personal encounter with God on Mount Horeb, God tells Elijah that Elisha is to be his successor. And the very next thing Elijah does is go and find Elisha to begin training him. And they spend the next 12 to 13 years together preparing. Number 2, let your potential successor get close to you, to learn, to observe, to work with you and experience what you do. In 2 Kings chapter 2, Elisha asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And Elijah says, okay, but only if you see me when I'm taken from you up to heaven in a whirlwind. In other words, he says, you have to stick close to me at all times. Observe and learn, Elisha. Number 3, you have to have a compelling vision of what you will go on to do next. In the Deloitte study I mentioned earlier, it describes how many a succession plan fails because the senior leader just can't quite bring themselves to let go and pass on the baton because they can't imagine life without their current role. If you don't have an exciting and compelling vision of what comes next for you, then passing on your role to a successor, well, it's like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. Elijah had a very clear idea of where he was going next, to be with the Lord in glory, and it doesn't get more motivating than that. And then number 4, have a plan of how you will announce your successor. Here we need to be clear so that there isn't organizational speculation and instability. But as with many things in leadership, timing is absolutely critical. So much of good leadership is about timing and getting the timing right. Leave it too late and there isn't enough time to hand on well. Announce too early and your authority ebbs away prematurely and you're left as a sort of dead duck prime minister, as we might say. During Elijah's day, there were 3 main companies or academies of prophets in the land: at Gilgal, at Bethel, and in Jericho. And Elijah intentionally visits all 3 on a sort of retirement tour with Elisha to show all the prophets in the land who his successor would be. He announced it well and in a timely fashion. So if that's a little of what the current leader can do, next, what can the wider organization do? And I want to stress one thing. The key thing here is not to gossip and speculate about when the current leader will move on and who will replace them. One of the occupational hazards, I guess, of working with prophets is that they tend to know what might happen next. And we see in the story that at both Bethel and Jericho, the prophets say to Elisha, "Hey, don't you know Elijah is about to be taken by the Lord?" And each time Elisha replies wisely by saying, "Yes, I know, but shh, don't speak of it." So trust your leaders, trust the process, and choose not to engage in endless, destabilizing speculation at the water cooler. And finally, what can the chosen successor do to make the succession successful? If you are about to be promoted into someone else's shoes, a new role, what can you do? 3 things. Number 1, be loyal to your predecessor. Elisha stuck closely to Elijah and refused to engage in speculation about his predecessor's time finishing. Number 2, when Elijah is finally taken up to heaven, his mantle or his cloak was left behind as a symbol of the office of prophet. Elisha has to choose to pick it up and proactively put it on. In other words, when you get the chance to lead, lead. Wear your mantle. And number 3, keep the best bits from your predecessor's reign. Just before leaving, one of the last things Elijah does is he takes his cloak and he strikes the river Jordan with it to part the waters to cross over with Elisha. And then once Elisha has succeeded him as prophet, the very first thing he does is exactly the same action. Strikes the water with the cloak to cross back over the Jordan. He'd learnt from his predecessor and was applying it. Now, some things that your predecessor previously did may need changing, and the extent of change will depend upon the leadership challenge that you face. Now, it's likely that every leadership challenge is essentially one of these 4 types of challenge that spell the mnemonic STAR, S-T-A-R. Your challenge might be S, a startup situation. You have to begin something new from scratch. Or T, a turnaround. Things are going badly. Can you turn it around? A stands for acceleration. The fundamentals are good, but can the organization grow faster? Or R, that stands for realignment. The fundamentals aren't bad, but the organization has strayed a little from its true north, from its core mission or values. Can you realign it? But whatever the leadership challenge you face, there is probably some good stuff from the old regime you could keep. Organizations tend to have muscle memory. Even churches have spiritual muscle memory. So ask yourself this question. What was the organization or what was your predecessor doing when the organization was performing at its best? In other words, as the saying goes, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So in conclusion, succession planning is something relevant for all of us. Take ownership of it. It's a sign of your strong leadership. Start early. Give yourself plenty of time. Be clear of what or who you're looking for, not forgetting culture fit. Maybe have several horses in the race and let them get truly close to you to learn and experience. Have a compelling vision of what you'll do next. This is about your future as well. And have a clear, timely plan of how to announce it to the organization. Well done for listening to this and getting to the end. I hope it's been helpful. If it has been helpful, please do share it with your colleagues and friends. And we look forward to you listening next week to the next podcast on leadership. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to On Leadership. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, why not share it with a friend or post it on social media? Whatever platform you're listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow and turn on your notifications to receive more great content from HTBB.